Unsealed podcast. You might notice we don't have a guest star with us this week, so I guess we're going to put the spotlight on Mr. Bobby Small this time. Bobby, how do you feel about that?
I'm okay with talking about myself.
I thought you might be. Well, cool. Yeah, I'm just gonna interview Bobby kind of throughout this podcast, see how he got where he is today. And, we'll start off with Bobby, where did your career really start? What's your career journey look like?
I was going to ask you a question. So you're 24,
Yes.
25. So I wanted to put a spin in my mind on like where I was in my career as to the point where you were born, because I've probably been working longer than you've been alive. My like official career.
But, yeah, 99.
Yep, 99. So yeah, so it's interesting. I started working really early on. So I kind of think to myself like how I got certain work ethic and where it evolved from. My dad owned a construction business, like a small residential paving contractor. So back east, it was quite common to have asphalt driveways. It's not so much where I am now, but a lot of homes had asphalt driveways where I grew up. And so he owned this business. So every summer, even at a young age, like 7 or 8, I was working to some degree, like sweeping or picking up trash or doing something for a certain period of the summer. And so that kind of started, this, I guess, my journey into, learning how and what it is to work. But my first official job kind of in high school, it was at a shoe store, which I turned into a longer term career. I didn't go to college right out of high school. So, kind of my MO in life at pretty much any place I've been has been to start and then, just, apply that work ethic and it turns into, promotions through the channel. And so I ended up being when I left the shoe store, I was a store manager. So I had gone from just, retail associate and salesperson, won a bunch of sales awards. We had, salesperson of the month, blah, 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 sales contests and all that kind of stuff, which was fun. It was pretty low pressure, but there was definitely some pressure to, it's commission sales. So there was definitely some pressure.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of a fun start. And that would have been 1988 is when I left there. So it was from like 85 to 88. I was, Al Bundy of the world. Those either old enough or to know who that is from Married with Children. He was like the most famous shoe salesman.
Okay.
Yeah. On TV. So that was kind of my first, I would call it career, point. Like I said, I worked there in high school and then it kind of jumped right into the management piece and then decided I wanted to move on. And then everything from there just kind of fell forward. Like I happened to know somebody. I was just mentioning we were talking about John Walsh. Do you know John Walsh at all?
I don't think
the name. He started a show called America's Most Wanted.
Okay.
Which was pretty big in like the 90s and 2000s, and it was out there tracking and gathering leads and trying to capture people who were, on the FBI's most wanted list.
Mm-hmm.
But his first kind of big endeavor was something called the Adam Walsh Child Resource Center, and that was to help find missing kids, and it also was called exploited kids, but mostly to help find kids who were missing. And his son, I want to say in the late 70s, like 79, it was a big case in Florida. His son went missing and then was found dead, unfortunately. And I don't know that they ever solved that case, but he felt in the process that there weren't good resources to help him get the word out, like spread flyers or, to contact people to help, in the search or whatever they could do in that situation. So he created these centers around the country to aid in that. So I worked at this child resource center in Washington, D.C., which was mostly pretty boring, because what you want out of that is not to have any missing kids. So, it should be pretty boring. We did have one case in D.C. where we did have to kind of crank into action, and it turned out really positive. It was an infant that was stolen from the hospital, of all places, and we put flyers up everywhere and distributed, all kinds of information. And a fireman who happened to get the flyer and was aware of it, noticed a woman who was acting strangely and reported it to the police. And it turned out that it was the baby that had been stolen. So they were able to recover this kid. So
that's something awesome to be a part of. So what were you specifically in charge of there? Were you just the one going around hanging up flyers, or were you coming up with like different plans of action? What did that kind of look like?
Kind of a little bit of everything. So like I said, mostly it was, a lot of requests from schools, from police departments, just asking for resources. Like, hey, we printed a lot of material on, don't talk to strangers, take a bite out of crime, that kind of stuff. And so we had all these, you're right. Yeah, right. Stranger danger, all these materials that we had printed up and ready to go. So we had a pretty small office. And so I would just, field calls or inquiries through the mail and just fulfill those most days. Sometimes it would be a media interview or two, on what we were doing. I was the assistant director. So there was an executive director and I was the assistant to the director. And so then, once there was once that kidnapping occurred, then, it was quick action. So we had to, work on, that file that we distributed, getting those printed. I did a lot of like on the ground delivery to make sure it was timely. It wasn't like, oh, put this in the mail and whenever it gets there. This was kind of timely action. So getting those in the hands of the people that could distribute them, putting some up myself. Again, coordinating some media effort to get material out. And that became more of a really, fast-paced, obviously very crucial response.
Very important too.
Yeah. So that was kind of, again, it was like 99% of the time it was again pretty boring, but at least you kind of knew you were doing something impactful at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's an interesting job because if you're like, oh, I'm so bored at work, it's like, well, that's probably a good thing to be bored rather than always.
This is one area where being bored actually, like you said, is probably the better option than to be really busy with more important activities.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
And that happened to be in an office that was part of a larger. So they were renting space in a bigger office building, and so my next opportunity came with that company that owned that building, and they were looking for, of all things. I mean, I got to know the folks that were there. It was a pretty small building. So, and, the office was open. I got to know, I think there was a shared space for like, lunch and stuff. So I got to know the folks there and they really wanted to hire me. And so I jumped into a job at this insurance company is what it was. And they hired me into their like IT, kind of their quasi IT department. It wasn't quite what I did later on in life, but it was basically the equivalent of an IT department. A lot of reports, a lot of some backup stuff, and some other just kind of odds and ends at the end of the day. And again, just really excelled, and they offered me a job as an insurance agent at some point. So I kind of elevated into that role, which was fun, and again in a different way. Just a lot of interaction with a varied clientele in DC. So kind of some high profile, actually mainly high profile clientele, because it was if you at the level that this insurance agency was operating, you had to have money. You're getting multiple policies. And so, yeah, it was, a really good experience, kind of my first business experience, using a computer. I learned a valuable lesson. Actually, I was working at the Child Resource Center. They were letting me print stuff at the insurance company overnight. So I went in, we were printing some kind of reports or something, and they let me go in overnight and do this. And something crashed on a computer. Oh, no. And we're talking about old computers, green screen, skinny clacks. And I was, this is like 2 a.m, and all of a sudden it's like melting. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? What am I gonna do? I sat there the rest of the night. I didn't want to go home. I this is like 1988. There's no cell phone. You know, it's like, so I'm just going to sit there and wait for the first person to come in. And this gal named Cindy, the office manager, came in. I was like, oh my God, Cindy, I don't know what to tell you. I blew up the computer system. And she's like, oh, let me take a look. And she looks at it. She's like, oh, click, clack. And, and she fixed it and started rolling again. I was like, what? That's too easy.
Yeah.
So it actually gave me a quick lesson on, just maybe it's, computers aren't as dire as maybe, I thought they were.
You didn't know about the turn it off, turn it back on kind of deal yet.
Exactly. I wasn't quite hip to that action yet. So yeah, I was just frightened that, the bejeebus out of me. So I was, happy that it was something simple and took that lesson forward for sure.
Yeah. That's cool having that like first kind of interactions with computers and things like that. And I was going to mention too, you saying that you got your job from kind of being in the same office as the insurance agency, because I'm sure back then it's not like you had LinkedIn or anything like that where you could just connect with people or apply online or things like that. It's like you had to know people in person to be able to find that next opportunity.
That there probably were, I don't think I ever used one. There probably were like, recruiters of some sort, doing this, more manually. But other than that, it was the newspaper. You opened the newspaper into the classified and went to the job section and started looking. Make the phone call. Whereas, like now it's like they're either contacting you through LinkedIn or you're going out to LinkedIn or Indeed or even still maybe some, word of mouth. But yeah, it was nice that I just had that quick in and you got that job, through word of mouth.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's like a testament to your personality too. People just know you and they're like, oh, can we hire you?
You get in, it's like, I really, again, I've thought about it because it wasn't like my dad or my uncle, who also worked the business with my dad, ever sat down and taught lessons about work ethic. Like, here's what you do and here's how it is. But I obviously picked up a lot from them. And my uncle was a perfectionist who, like, would if a rock was out of place in a driveway, would want to redo the whole thing. It's like this was, like the epitome of perfection. And my dad was also just a steadfast worker. Like he wasn't quite the perfectionist my uncle is, but still, just, as far as like getting stuff done, he just never seemed idle. Like if there was something to be done, he was doing it. And I just picked that. I think I just picked that up just by watching, because, like I said, there was never a point at which I was taught a lesson that I can remember. It was always just, kind of, I guess I saw it happening and just kind of pulled that forward.
Yeah, I feel like work ethic isn't something that can necessarily be taught, but it's just something you pick up by seeing others or things like that. So that's awesome.
I remember that when I've done a ton of hiring later in my career, and that's the one thing I valued more than anything in an interview. Like, credentials, like where you went to school, how many degrees you had, didn't, was less impressive to me than looking at your work history, at a person's work history, and seeing their longevity, or talking to them and hearing, stories about their work ethic. And because, like you put it perfectly, you can't, I mean, maybe, but it's hard to teach somebody these kind of soft skills. It can be done, but it's a long haul. I can teach you technical skills if you've got the act. If you want to do it, that kind of stuff can be taught. But teaching somebody personality skills, or interpersonal skills, communication, that's much harder. So if you've got that already, going for yourself, that to me is, and I see a trend in that as I'm looking at articles and talking to folks who are hiring. The trend really is moving away from, that degree based, well, you've got to have a bachelor's degree or, this or that, to more like, experience or, or personality is important, especially in the IT world. Because in like the 90s, IT guys were, typical nerds. It's like, and it's hard when you've got, when you need to be a hybrid, like, a small company where you've got to be able to work with all the employees and do the technical stuff too. Having that piece locked in is important.
Yeah. Even being able to easily teach someone too is very, very important. Yeah. Like you said, those soft skills are something that can't be taught in school or anything like that. So, Well, cool. So in the insurance agency role, you kind of took your first step into technology. What was the next role that you had kind of leading up?
So the insurance agency, unfortunately, some management changes and and just it really wasn't doing it for me anymore. And at the same time, had decided kind of personally that we were looking to move out of Washington D.C. area. So kind of well, let me back up. I'm sorry. This would have been more. It's been so long ago. I got to go back in the Wayback Machine.
Pull up your resume.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There was this. It was just kind of getting ready to get married, and I thought, you know what, this is a good break. I can take some time off. I fell back actually on my dad's business. I siphoned some of his work that he couldn't do, and I was able to do some of that over the summer. It's actually really good money. It's hard work, but it's good money. I was like, this is a good way to build up some money for wedding and honeymoon and stuff. And so I did that, and then got married, and then just took hit the newspaper like we talked about when I got back from honeymoon, and ended up. And this is really funny because it was very. I decided I just wanted to have a job for 1 minute that wasn't where I could just kind of lay low and be in the shadows. And so I ended up taking a job as an accounts receivable clerk at Culligan Bottled Water, or it was really Culligan Water, water treatment, because they hadn't started their bottled water yet. And it was cool. I liked it. And then, but pretty soon it was like, hey, you're doing pretty well. Do you want this other job that pays more and does a little bit more? And I was like, yeah, okay.
I can't say no to that.
Right. It was tough. It was like it's hard. So I ended up being, within about a year, I ended up taking the job as a general manager at what they had just formed, a bottled water division. So the company up to that point, and then they're all they were franchised. I think they're no longer, but it was a franchise in Washington, Maryland, and D.C. that one gentleman owned. It was the largest franchise in the Culligan organization from a size standpoint and geographic standpoint. And he started the bottled water division and had somebody running it that just wasn't working out. So I ended up taking over that and like 94. So by the way, we're up to like 94 now, 95, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
And
getting there.
Moved from Virginia to Maryland. So that was kind of the first big move. And because the office was located just outside of Baltimore. And so I spent a number of years doing that. And so that was good. Again, that really, helped for me, helped kind of mold the management piece of my career. Cause I was then, as the first time I was actually managing people. So when I took over, there were, I'd kind of managed, I was kind of managing one or two people prior to that, but then took over and it was like a 30 or 40 person operation. So delivery drivers, internal staff, and, some other folks.
Was that a big learning curve to be managing that many people?
It was pretty scary. Yeah. I mean, it was, I didn't know what I was doing. Looking back, I was like, wow, what a trip to kind of think of myself in that, point. I learned so much since then. I'd love to go back and be me now back then, because I would have, been 100 times better. But
right, so much more now.
Yeah, just so much more experience and learn so much more from other folks. But yeah, ultimately, and again, in a time where there weren't a lot of resources. I mean, now we're to 95, 96. Internet still is pretty inaccessible. AOL really isn't coming around yet. It's still that's kind of the first big internet provider, back in the late 90s. So yeah, still really no access to a ton of information other than going to the library. Maybe if you're looking for self-help books on how to manage, how to lead.
Can I ask GPT how to be a good manager?
Right, no, ChatGPT. I do. The man who owned the company I looked up to, and he was a really good mentor. He, again, it wasn't like, hey, let me sit you down and talk to you about certain things, but I just watched him because he was a very successful business person, and he did it in a really good way. Like there was another person I worked for who I wouldn't look back and say was a good mentor. I tried to fit him in my my zone, but I wouldn't look up to him necessarily. He was more of a old time salesperson mentality, just wasn't, didn't fit mine. Mr. McNew, who is the owner, he definitely had a way about him and I think I picked up a lot from him. And I did that for 3 or 4 years and enjoyed it. I mean, we took the bottled water division and grew it, and we won some awards for best facility. It was fun because we bottled water at the facility, so it wasn't just a delivery service. We were bottling there. We had spring water delivered. We were bottling regular processed water as well, and so it was again a good fun time. But then got burned out. It was also an 80-hour a week job, and by the end I just had a kid and just wasn't interested in working 80 hours a week. Wasn't.
Yeah, you can't do that with a family. I
Yeah,
guess you could, but it's like you want to be a father at the same time. So
yeah, people do it, but it just wasn't for me. And so this is the point where we decided to move to Colorado, and it was kind of like a jumping off point. Like I had also kind of thought I want to go back to school. I felt right about it. Like I tried to do some schooling right out of high school, but it just wasn't working. And so I was like, this is a good opportunity. I'm more focused. I think I can accomplish this. And thought this would be a good opportunity. We packed everything we owned up into a U-Haul and drove.
What made you choose Colorado? Was there an opportunity out there? Is that where you wanted to go to school, or what was kind of?
Yes. So my wife is from Colorado. She grew up in Colorado.
Okay.
Gotcha. So we met in Virginia, but she had grown up in Colorado. Really loved the state, and her folks were getting a bit older, so we thought it was a good opportunity to go back and for a couple reasons. One, she could re-engage with her family there. She has a sister who she's close with, and her parents have a pretty big house, or at the time had a pretty big house that had a complete basement where we could live. So this was like an easy way for us to land without having any housing, and a place to stay for as long as we wanted. So it allowed us to establish. It allowed me to get through school without any overhead, and then by the time I got to Colorado, I had decided I was going to be an artist, because that's what I kind of started out doing when I left high school. I thought I wanted to do that, and spent about a year getting residency so I could get in-state tuition rates.
Smart.
And by the time I did that, I got convinced that artists don't make money. So I shifted into IT and got my degree in IT instead.
Nice. Do you think that your role at the insurance agency had anything to do with you choosing IT, or what was the reason for diving into that?
That's a good question. I think the best I can remember is that, even in my personal life, we just started to buy computers. So, it was like 95 or 96, got the first computer. I built a computer in like 98 or 99 when we replaced the first one. And so I just started to have a kind of a side interest, and realized I had some potential at doing this. And a lot of what IT work is, even developing, which I settled into later on, is problem solving. A lot of mathematics, and which is something I excelled at in high school, and so it really came down to it paid well. So IT had a great extension there, and it seemed like a good fit. Like I said, I dabbled personally, and so it just kind of seemed like the right fit, for again, for future earnings potential, and then for fun, so. And then I decided, I kind of rectified my own mind that I would do art things on my own time, draw, play music, whatever came about.
As a hobby rather than a career path.
Yeah, and if it family, like, because if I'd chosen art with a family, again, your earnings potential, what you're putting in the bank or whatever to support. Especially if I'd done some like acting, that's even worse, right? So like trying to become an actor is like no money until you do something with it.
Right, and then that could be a lot of time putting into it as well that you don't.
That leads you, you could be a lot of time away. So this seemed like a good choice for me, and yeah, it worked out really well. I mean, I when I finally got to Colorado, I'd secured a job at a company called Ellipse Sportswear in their art department, and which is where I found out artists don't make money, and so everybody's like, don't do it. And so when I went back to get my degree, it turns out Ellipse Sportswear had an opening in their IT department. Just kind of fell in place. And so I was able to keep on with URA in a different capacity, and I ended up staying there. So that the rest of the story gets going pretty quickly, because I stayed with URA for 20 years up until the pandemic. I just decided to move on at that point, but spent a long career in IT with URA through various roles and tech support and network administration and developing, and then about the final 8 years as their IT vice president of information systems. So kind of directing the IT business and also strategic business decisions as well with the executive group. So, and that's again where, and that's this is where it kind of really started to hone my personality as from a business standpoint.
Wow, yeah, 20 years is a while to be there. That's awesome. You must have really liked what you were doing then, for sure.
Yeah, and this is the interesting point. I mean, one thing that I learned back at Culligan, just from watching people do this, I saw so many people get frustrated at work. They had a bad day delivering or whatever it is, come in and quit. I can't take it anymore, Bobby. I quit. I'm gonna find another job. There's other delivery companies. And after a week, they'd call me back, say, "Hey, man, turns out this other job isn't that great. Do you mind? Can I come back?" And early on, I would say, yeah, it's cool. Come on back. And then they would do it again, like a month later or whatever. And after a while, I'd say, you probably should evaluate what you want to do in life, because if you're really not happy at Culligan,
why would you want to go to another delivering company?
Why do that? Yeah, and why keep coming back to Culligan? Because it's a crutch. And so eventually, I would say, sorry, I can't hire you back. This may seem harsh, but I think it'll be better if you take some time and figure out what it is you really want to do, and be careful and measured in your decisions. So at URA, when I was the IT support person, there came a point where I wasn't learning anything. I wasn't really being challenged, and I just kept an open line of communication with whoever my boss was, and I was like, hey, what can we add in? What can we do? How can we change this? And so I was able to keep flipping my career without feeling strained about it. So that helped a lot. It wasn't like I was doing one thing and just so happy at that one thing that sustains you for 20 years.
Right.
I kept pushing hard. It's like, if I hit a wall, I would start my internal process of, okay, I had a bad day, a bad week, a bad month. Where do the pros and cons lie, and how can I change them? And step up and have those conversations, because if I just didn't address them, then I'm missing an opportunity, a 20-year opportunity. If I just left for another job, maybe that other job's better, maybe it's not, but I felt it was just like you wouldn't in everyday relationship, whether it's a friend or a spouse or a family. You don't walk out, most people don't walk out, without doing the hard work of like, hey, we've hit a rough patch. How can we solve it? How do we get past this rough patch? And so that really sustained me through my entire career. And when I eventually left, it was because I got to that point where I weighed the pros and cons, and I weighed them, and when I made my decision, it was so freeing and liberating. I didn't have any regret. There was no point at which, even through like, please stay, come on, we'll offer you more money, we'll do this. I was like, I'm good. I came to a really strong conclusion based on solid evidence in my, and so I feel good about this, and I'm ready to move on to the next stage of wherever that takes me.
Yeah.
Which happened to take me to Ellipse. So.
But yeah, that's something really good to realize about yourself. And I feel like that's good advice too. I feel like a lot of people with their jobs are like, oh, like you said, I'm just going to leave. But like you said, you wouldn't do that with your relationships with your spouse, your family, your friends. So I feel like that's a good way to compare it to other things.
Yeah, and you'll know if it's a train wreck. Like if it's a train wreck, then that runway to get to your pros and cons is quick.
Right.
Like train wreck, definitely get running, but you've got a good thing. It's just, definitely be measured about it. And through URA, I started working in Dynamics. Of all things, we implemented an early version of the software that Ellipse supports now, so quickly became a developer in the software, learned the functionality, the interface, and so that really propelled me to where and when I left URA, it wasn't like I went looking. I actually didn't go looking for a job immediately in the channel. I wasn't like, oh, I've got to find my next Dynamics opportunity. I kind of thought now I'm later stage, maybe my kids are grown, maybe I could do something in the art world, or maybe go take some classes or get a second degree or whatever it is, and kind of shift gears. And it just turns out that some friends in the community said, hey, there's a job opening at Ellipse, and we think you'd really like it at the company, and we think that you'd be a good fit. So I interviewed with Jenna, and we had a great conversation, and actually came away thinking maybe it wasn't the greatest fit. You know, we liked each other. We had a great conversation, but at the end of the day, it was like, I don't know. And she was like, yeah, we're looking for somebody with a little bit more functional experience in D365. Mine had all been in earlier versions. But she's like, let me just run it by Mikhail. And they're like, no, he'd still like to talk to you. So we ended up talking. Strangely enough, I probably drove by Dayton, just to the south, from my parents in Richmond, driving back to Colorado in the pandemic. And we got on the phone and talked for a couple hours. What was supposed to be like a half an hour conversation turned into about 2. And I came away thinking, you know, I actually could work at this company. I really enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, I got home and they offered me a job.
Wow.
And yeah, so I've been here 3. This will be coming up on my 4th year, actually.
Oh, wow. That's crazy to think about.
I know it doesn't seem like it's, and even, you know, to my previous point, even within this, I've already shifted careers twice. So I started as a business analyst, and it wasn't fulfilling me. And I told them early on, and you know, I kept talking to Mikhail and talking to Gary, and slowly took on some marketing work with Brent and Ryan, who was at the company at the time before you got here. And you know, at the end of it, I said, I'll give it a year. But at a year's time, I you know, unless something drastic has changed, I think I'm probably going to look for something different. And that's when they offered the role in the kind of quasi marketing, you know, pre-sales, business development side. And it actually seemed like a perfect opportunity to do something I love to do, which is talk to people and make relationships. And so I actually it was kind of the perfect new opportunity, like something I hadn't done before, but still in technology. So I still got to dabble a bit here and there, and still kind of stay in touch with what, you know, the technology is and around it. So that was kind of a fun piece to be able to kind of keep with me, and that switching of roles.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had another question, but it completely slipped my mind now. But yeah, this role I feel like is definitely very fitting of you. Like you said, more interaction. Have you always been very like personable and like outgoing and things like that, or?
I'd say so. I mean, like I you know, famously in high school, I flunked out of my like 10th grade, like 4th quarter English because I refused to give speeches. I would, you know, prepare them, and we had like, maybe you had to do 5, I can't remember the number, but there was like a number of speeches, different types of speeches, like a how-to speech, a debate speech, whatever, like different types of speeches. And I would prepare them. And then when it came my turn, I would either skip the class until it just got past the point of me doing it. Like I would just skip classes and get in trouble that way. Or I would just refuse to walk up to the front.
Wow.
When they would call my name, I would just like, nope. And there was the one I recall very specifically. I had a speech prepared on how to make popcorn. Such a dumb thing. And I was going to make popcorn for the class. You know, it was supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just couldn't do it. I just was deathly afraid. Culligan helped out a lot there. I had to break that barrier quick, as you know, being in an upper management role, you're in meetings. I did a lot of sales presentations for bottled water at different larger organizations. So I was going into, actually with the first, I'll never forget the first one. It was a law firm, and I had to go in and pitch our bottled water service to this law firm. And it was like every law secretary. So it was a group of like 50 women in a conference room, and me, like all focused. And I was just, I mean, nervous to no end. I'd never done anything like this before, and I had to pitch our bottled water service, and I ended up getting the account, and so that helped chip away at this kind of this, you know, things I've learned are, you know, for the most part, when you're in these kind of meetings, whether they're in person or if you're on the stage at Summit where there's, you know, 1,000 people in the audience, they're rooting for you.
Yeah, definitely.
They want you to you know, be articulate and and excited and all those things. They're happy to have you succeed. And so that helped me to really gain confidence over the nervousness aspect. Although I still got, pretty, it was later on I started acting and stuff, and that really took the edge off too, just kind of keeping myself out there.
Yeah. Now you're
Helps
pretty
too.
used to being on a stage and everything. But yeah,
I'd say
public speaking is I feel like almost everyone has a fear of it at some point in their life. So
yeah. I mean, I mean, even, like even 1-on-5, sometimes it could be daunting depending on your topic.
yes.
It does take some practice, and some people are natural at it, and some, definitely it takes some practice and some confidence building.
Yeah. I know for myself, I took my communications class online while I was still in high school. So all of my friends waited till college to take it, and they always had to like do a speech on Fridays or something, and would always be so nervous. So I was just like, I'm just so glad I don't have to do that right now, because that is definitely not my forte either. So
I mean, if you haven't had an opportunity to do a ton, but like any, like, do you get nervous at all speaking in front of even like a small group, like at like our sales meeting or anything like that?
I will say, like, when I first got hired here, I would get nervous to go during my turn, like in our sales meeting, but not as much anymore, because I know you guys now. But at the beginning, I didn't know anyone, so it's just kind of nerve-wracking. Or even this podcast, I was nervous about that at first. So it's just like you said, it takes getting used to whatever it is. So
you bet. Yeah, you almost forget, like at the end of the day, if you just kind of think about it not being a big room, and you're telling your story, whatever it is, and you know your story. That's the other part of the win, being up there. If you know what you're talking about, it's something if you're, hey, give me some people, you could give them any topic and they don't even have to know it. They could just, BS it or whatever. They're that good or that comfortable. But for folks that, if you're doing a topic and you know it, then it's really just a matter of telling your story and kind of, forgetting that there's anybody out there even.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, we got to you in your current role now. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about while being at Ellipse, or anything you wanted to feature there?
I think probably one of the most important things that carried me through kind of as a sidecar was that, strange enough, the Dynamics community. So I got involved in like the user community back in 2011, and went to my first summit, community summit, which is the kind of the national gathering of education and networking that happens in the Dynamics community. And so kind of got introduced at that event there, and went to a couple after that, but it wasn't steady until 2014. And it was like January of 2014, took over as a local leader in Colorado. And then, again, I'm also the kind of person that is, definitely, helps out. It's like I'm it's hard for me. I learned, in the last couple of years, 5 years or so, how to kind of say no and craft, my schedule around that, like knowing when I needed to stop and pull back. But ultimately, if I've got time, I'll volunteer. And so it was like, hey, yeah, this seems like a fun opportunity to grow the community and do something in the community. So I took over as the chapter leader in Colorado, and then that was a springboard to being involved in programming the summits. Later on, a few years later, and then pandemic hit and things kind of shifted and went awry and fluttered and but then those connections carried forward. So all the folks that I knew from that community, even though I was not in the community, so 2020, I left the community, and I still ran 3 meetings over the summer virtually because nobody else was there to do it. And I was like, I'll do it. I mean, I'm not doing anything else. I'm sitting in my basement in the pandemic, so might as well have virtual meetings. And so, kind of kept that piece going. And then, when things came back, they came back, and there were 2 communities now, or 2 driving forces in the community. There was the old DCI, which is still running Summit, and then this new community, which was cropping up to support local users and support an alternate event in the space. And so I've been helping those events through the programming committees for the last couple of years as well. So and again, every time I do a programming committee or an event, make a new connection, usually a deep one, which it lasts and creates more connections. So really have enjoyed the community aspect of being in the Dynamics user group, and what it's brought for me, and what it brings to the overall community. So
I know, seeing you at Summit or any of these events, it's like I feel like so many people know who you are just through your connections and things like that. So it's always so fun watching you just mingle around and everything.
It is fun, and it's part of it. It's funny that I'm definitely not afraid to brand, and we know that this year we went all purple, and
Yes.
I was last year before we kind of went all purple, I already started going all purple. It's like I see the value in that, and that kind of brand activity, and it also helps that I'm my height is people that recognize me immediately. It's like here's this this little dude buzzing around because I'm also pretty energetic, I guess you could say. So I move fast and get around there, and I really love the live events. I mean, there's just so much energy and fun when you get there, if you're built for it. It's like some people, again, are built for this type of energy output, and even somebody like myself, it takes a strong minute afterwards to kind of regain all the good energy and get ready for the next thing. But
yeah, your social battery can be drained pretty quickly by the end of it, but that's not a bad thing either.
No, it's a good way to use, for me, like it's a good way to use social energy, and I love it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, awesome. I feel like we're kind of running out of time a little bit. Are there any like last words that you want to say? Any pieces of advice from all your years of hard work?
Boy, you put me on the spot. No, I think we've laid so many Easter eggs. You just have to watch the whole thing and pick them up, man. Yeah, I mean, work hard. Be authentic. At the end of the day, that's kind of, those have been my mantras. Like always integrity and always authentic, and it's done pretty well for me. Definitely,
yeah, and network too. I feel like that's something that I've picked up in this episode as well.
Networking is if you're even outside of the industry, it's like amazing. Just networking, you even if you decide you're moving here, there, wherever it is, just continuing to network and learning how to network well. It gives you those opportunities to step into other groups and dive in. Like outside of like this, I have other networking groups that I circle in, for bike events or for choir or for acting or for other, all these little silos of network that sometimes cross over here and there, but mostly there. But learning that networking piece and getting comfortable, just kind of naked networking, being not afraid to just get out there and and meet people is that's a pretty big skill and a pretty big advantage in life.
Right. Yeah. Not even just for workplace settings, just life in general. Yeah. Get to know more people.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, Bobby, thank you for sharing your journey and everything. It's been fun to hear.
Well, thanks for listening to me.
Yeah, of course. Anytime. So cool. Well, for those of you listening, thanks for joining us once again. And until next time, bye, Bobby.
Peace.